I am starting to lose track of the number of times that I have recorded an episode of the NES archive and forgotten to turn on my microphone. Well, this time it's turned on, so welcome back to the NES archive, where we are taking a look at the North American NES library one game at a time. And today's game was originally released alongside the launch of the Nintendo Entertainment System in North America on October 18th, 1985. The game is Wild Gunman. It was another of the light gun series of games, and of course, it was a shooter. The tagline for the game reads, "Take on the fastest gun in the West in Wild Gunman." Let's take a look at the back of the box. Your palm sweats as you grip your Zapper light gun. The outlaw's eyes flash. He yells fire, and suddenly you're in the middle of a Wild West shootout. Get the outlaw before he gets you, and you'll be rewarded. But watch out, the more you win, the tougher it becomes, because this gunman has some very nasty friends. You can take out one outlaw, two outlaws, or the whole wild gang. Are you up to the action? Because it's fast and furious in this quick on-the-trigger Nintendo light gun game. The developer of the game was Nintendo R&D 1. The game's producer was Gunpei Yokoi, who actually designed the original arcade game back in 1974, which is really interesting. The light gun game in 1974 was this. It had a projector, and they used actual actors to film the game. I think it might be the first live action game ever made. And it's weird. I actually kind of remember playing this, obviously not back in 1974, but I think I came across it in an arcade sometime. I think maybe when I was in the Army, I saw it. But you would have a holster that you would wear, and you had to keep the gun in the holster, and it would show the actor walking or, putting a saddle on a fence or something like that. And then he would turn and his eyes would flash, which it wasn't really his eyes would flash. Almost his whole face would flash, and he would draw his gun and shoot. And you had to draw your gun as soon as his eyes flashed and shot. And I think there were like maybe 4 or 5 actors that you would go up against. And if you won, then it would show the guy falling down. And if you lost, it would show the guy kind of standing there, and it would say you lose on the screen. I just thought it was really interesting. I mean, Gunpei Yokoi really must have been into these light gun games. He also invented the Duck Hunt light gun game, which used a projector on your wall in your house and had like a little shotgun that you would play with. So Wild Gunman seems to be another game that would be right up his alley. The NES game was designed by Makoto Kano, who designed games like Kid Icarus for the NES and also went on to produce Super Metroid for the Super Nintendo. As with most games from the NES launch, the sound was by Hirokazu Tanaka, and it was pretty good. I liked the sound in the game. I didn't think it's like the best, but it was better than the almost no sounds that were in Hogan's Alley. The game consisted of 3 modes. Game A and Game B were basically the same. Game A had 1 gunman, Game B had 2. The gunman would walk out, they would say fire at the same time, their eyes would flash, they would draw their gun. You had to draw your gun and shoot the gunman, basically just like the arcade game that I mentioned. The manual even states that it is against the rules to draw your gun before the gunman does, and if you shoot the gunman before he says fire, you lose. Like I said before, in game mode A, there's 1 enemy, and in game mode B, there's 2. If you shoot the wrong gunman in game mode B, you lose, because they don't both always say fire, they don't both always shoot. So you'll have these 2 guys walk out, probably equidistant from the sides of the screen, and then they face you, and then you have to pay attention. Which one is going to be shooting? Is it the one on the left or the one on the right, or is it going to be both of them? I definitely felt like this mode was the most difficult, mostly because I found myself shooting the guy. I would shoot both out of reflex, and maybe the guy on the right didn't say fire, so I was shooting him and I'm not supposed to, and that would cost me a life. And you only get 3 lives, you run out of lives, and it's game over. Game mode C gives you 15 bullets, and you have to dispatch of 10 gunmen. It looks like there's a saloon, and there's I think 3 doors on top, 3 windows on top, 2 windows on the bottom, and a door. And they can pop out of any of those and you have to shoot them. I found this to be the most fun mode for me. And I think it's because it was the most like Hogan's Alley, which I think is my favorite light gun game. But there was less waiting. In game modes A and B, you found yourself waiting for them to say fire. Whereas this, you didn't have to wait. Just as soon as they popped out, you shot them and got the points. And it felt like there was a lot more action with that mode. So that was definitely my favorite mode. And, you know, another good reason is because it reminds me of my favorite light gun game. The game had 5 different gunmen that you would encounter. None of them really felt different. They just looked different. Some of them had really hilarious things that would happen when you shoot them, like maybe their pants would drop or their hat would go flying off. I really liked the variety of guys. I just wish that maybe they would behave differently, like in Ms. Pac-Man, how the different ghosts would behave differently. I think it would be good if the guy that wore the poncho would, I don't know, maybe he would shoot faster than the guy who was really tall and skinny. I think that would have added a little more depth to the game, and it might make me like the game more. When Wild Gunman came out for the NES, it received mixed reviews at that time. Most of the articles from the time of release were in other languages, but Tilt Magazine gave the game a 55, PowerPlay gave it a 25, and Computer and Video Games gave the game a 7 out of 10. This was the one that was in English, so I'll read the little blurb out of theirs. It said, "It would have been better if the game's action was more varied. Gunmen on horses, for instance, so you would have to change elevations of where you were going to shoot, because you were always shooting along the middle of the screen. But you can't have everything if you're trying for coin-op realism, even if it is antiquated action." For me, I never played Wild Gunman when I was a kid. In fact, I never knew it existed. My friends and I really enjoyed playing the Zapper light gun games, but no one that I knew had it, and no one that I knew ever mentioned it, or we never saw it in a store either. Like I said before, I felt like game mode B was the most difficult, but game mode C was definitely the most fun. A couple pieces of trivia about the game is the game was actually featured in Back to the Future 2. Marty walks into a restaurant and he sees a couple of kids, one of which is Elijah Wood from Lord of the Rings, trying to figure out how to play this game. He shows them how to play, and then, of course, he's in the future, 2015 at the time, and one of the kids says, "Oh my gosh, you have to use your hands," and the other one says, "That's like a game for babies," which I found hilarious at the time, and I still find hilarious. Make sure you go find that clip someplace. I mentioned this, I believe, in both my Duck Hunt videos and my video about Hogan's Alley. And if you haven't watched those, you should check them out. But the ultimate smash for the Duck Hunt character in Smash Brothers involves a shootout between the bad guys from Hogan's Alley and Wild Gunman. I always thought it was really cool that they took these 3 of their best light gun games and kind of coalesced them into one character and brought it forward into Smash Brothers. All right, I've already said it a couple times, but I think my favorite light gun game is Hogan's Alley. I'm curious as to what your favorite light gun games are. I did receive an email the other day, and somebody, because I had asked that same question when I did my Duck Hunt video, and somebody mentioned Area 51 was one of their favorite light gun games, and I actually had forgotten about those light gun games. Like, I was so wrapped up in doing this NES stuff that I had forgotten all of these great light gun games from the arcade. Games like Area 51 or the Terminator game. There was even that one, I can't remember the name of it, but it was the one where you had a pedal on the floor, and I believe that if you were standing on the pedal, your character would stand up, but if you picked your foot up, the character would crouch, and then you could use your gun to shoot, and I think you were like a police officer going through, and you had to hide behind cover. And there were actually multiple versions of that game, or multiple sequels anyway. That game was great, but if I had to say which game I put the most time into playing, it was definitely Hogan's Alley. Even though I didn't own it, Duck Hunt was the one that I owned, but my friend had Hogan's Alley, and we were always over at his house competing to see who could get the best score. Wild Gunman is pretty good, but I don't think it's as good as Hogan's Alley was. But I'm curious, what are your favorite light gun games? Well, that's it for this episode of the NES Archive. Make sure that you check out the other videos in the series, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.